The folder lands on your kitchen table at 11:22 p.m. on a Wednesday. You've read everything in it twice already. You're about to read it a third time, not because the numbers are confusing, but because you keep finding new ways to interpret how bad they are. 12 locations, 3 states, a brand that peaked in 2017 and has been quietly bleeding ever since. The kind of bleeding that doesn't show up in the headlines, just in the weekly sales reports that the previous ownership stopped printing because looking at them had become its own kind of punishment. You paid $2.3 million for this. Cash mostly. Some seller financing on the back end that felt generous at the time and feels like a countdown clock now. The bank, a regional lender out of Nashville that financed the working capital bridge, has a covenant review in 90 days. If the numbers don't move, they pull the facility. If they pull the facility, you don't make payroll in month 4. If you don't make payroll in month 4, 340 people find out on a Tuesday that their direct deposit didn't land. You close the folder. You make coffee you don't need. You stand at the window and look at the street below and think, okay, let's go. Here is what you bought and why you bought it, because the why matters more than people think. The chain is called Harvest Table. Casual dining, the kind of place with mason jar light fixtures and a chalkboard specials menu that hasn't changed since 2019. Burgers, sandwiches, a salad section that exists primarily to make people feel better about ordering the burger. The locations are spread across Tennessee, Kentucky, and southern Indiana, mid-sized markets, not cities, not towns. The in-between places where Harvest Table was, for about 4 years, the nicest sit-down option within a reasonable drive. Then the fast casual wave hit those markets. Then a Chili's renovated 2 locations nearby. Then COVID reshaped dining habits in ways that Harvest Table's ownership neither understood nor adapted to. They held on because they'd been in the restaurant business for 22 years and they believed the brand still meant something. They weren't wrong about that. They were wrong about almost everything else. You found the listing through a business broker you've worked with twice before, a careful man named Gerald who only calls when he thinks something is genuinely worth your time. He called on a Thursday morning in March, said he had a distressed casual dining chain, 12 units, real estate leases with 4 to 7 years remaining, brand recognition still solid in secondary markets, and an ownership group that needed out in under 6 months for reasons he wasn't entirely at liberty to discuss, but which you correctly inferred involved a divorce, a tax situation, and at least one family member who had stopped speaking to another. You flew out and walked 3 locations in 2 days. You ate the food. You talked to the staff, not the managers, the servers, the line cooks, the woman running the host stand at the Bowling Green location, who had been there 9 years and still knew half her regulars by name. You asked her what she thought the problem was. She said, and this was almost word for word, the food is still good, the people still like us, we just stopped acting like it mattered whether they came back. You bought the chain 6 weeks later. Day 1, you don't announce yourself. You drive to the Clarksville location, park in the back, and spend 4 hours watching the lunch service from a corner booth with a notebook and a bowl of the tomato bisque that, honestly, is better than it has any right to be given everything else going on. What you observe in those 4 hours tells you most of what you need to know. The front-of-house staff is undertrained and overscheduled. The kitchen is running a menu with 34 items when it has the line capacity for maybe 22. Ticket times are averaging 19 minutes on a lunch service that should be hitting 12. The manager, a 31-year-old named Damon who has clearly been holding this location together through sheer personal force of will, is doing 3 jobs simultaneously and doing all of them at about 70%. You take 14 pages of notes, you eat the burger, it's good. That matters. The financial picture, when your operator digs into the full P&L across all 12 units, is clarifying in the way that very bad news is sometimes clarifying. Average unit volume across the chain has dropped 31% from its 2018 peak. Labor is running at 38% of revenue. The industry standard for a healthy casual dining operation sits at 28 to 32. Food cost is acceptable, 29%, which tells you the kitchen knows what it's doing. The problem isn't the product. The problem is everything surrounding the product. 7 of the 12 locations are losing money on a unit economics basis. 3 are break-even. 2 are profitable in a way that is just barely sufficient to feel real. The 2 profitable units are in Murfreesboro and Paducah. Both are run by lifers, managers who have been with the brand for more than a decade and operate their locations like they personally own them. You note their names, you'll talk to them before anyone else. Strategy 1 is triage. You close 2 locations by the end of week 3. Not because you want to, Because the math says 2 of the losing units are in markets that have structurally changed in ways no amount of operational improvement is going to fix. A Bowling Green location sits 400 feet from a new development that added 3 competing concepts in the last 18 months. A location in Evansville has a lease that repriced upward at renewal and cannot be made to work at current volume. You negotiate lease terminations. You offer every employee either a transfer to a nearby unit or a severance package that is more than the law requires. Gerald tells you that's not standard practice. You tell him you know. Strategy 2 is the menu. You bring in a food consultant who has worked in mid-market casual dining for 20 years and whose entire professional personality can be summarized as a strong dislike of menus that confuse busyness with value. He spends 3 days in the test kitchen in Nashville. He comes back with a recommendation to cut from 34 items to 18. Keep the burger, keep the tomato bisque, keep 4 of the sandwiches. Cut the pasta section entirely because nothing on it is ordered more than 60 times a week across 12 locations, and every one of those items slows down the kitchen. You implement it across all remaining 10 units in 30 days. The kitchen teams, almost without exception, respond the way kitchen teams respond to being asked to do less with more focus. They get faster. Ticket times drop to an average of 13 minutes within 6 weeks. Strategy 3 is labor restructuring, which is the hardest part and the part you don't sleep well through. You're not cutting people, you're cutting hours that were scheduled out of habit rather than need. You go shift by shift across every unit with the general managers and you rebuild the schedule around actual traffic data, not historical assumptions about when people might show up. The Sunday brunch shift at 4 locations that has been staffed for 80 covers and serving 30 gets restructured. You lose 2 employees who wanted the hours. You lose them respectfully. Labor moves from 38% to 33% across the chain in 60 days. Strategy 4 is the one that costs money up front and requires a certain kind of faith in the math. You identify the 3 locations with the clearest upside, Murfreesboro, Paducah, and a Franklin location that has a strong dinner trade but a dead lunch service, and you invest. Not a renovation. You're not spending money on new fixtures. You invest in local marketing, direct and specific. Geo-targeted digital ads in a 5-mile radius. A loyalty program built in 6 days on a platform that costs $400 a month. A standing arrangement with 3 local businesses near each location to offer employee lunch discounts every weekday, which costs you margin but fills seats during the quietest hour of the day. The Franklin location's lunch revenue increases 40% in 7 weeks. You stare at that number for a long time when it comes in. Day 61. You're in the Nashville office at 7 a.m. with your operator and the chain's newly promoted director of operations, a woman named Carla who spent 12 years at a regional franchise group and who, 3 weeks into this, told you that the previous ownership had never once asked her what she thought the problems were. You ask her constantly. She's always right. The numbers are moving. Not enough? Not yet. But the direction has changed, and direction is what you need to walk into a bank covenant review and say something credible. Average unit volume across the 10 remaining locations is up 11% against the comparable period. The 2 closed units have stopped bleeding. Labor is at 33%. The loyalty program has 4,200 enrolled members after 6 weeks, which for a regional casual dining chain in mid-size markets is not nothing. It is, in fact, the beginning of something. You have a conversation with Gerald the broker on day 63. He asks how you're doing. You tell him you're fine. He says he heard through the industry that a private equity-backed consolidator is starting to look at casual dining assets in the Southeast. He mentions this without apparent agenda. You write the name down. There is a moment, day 71, that you don't talk about afterward, but that you think about often. You're at the Paducah location on a Tuesday evening, sitting in the same corner booth configuration you always find, watching the dinner service. The manager, a 54-year-old named Earl, who has run this location for 11 years and who treats the dining room with the focused attention of a man who genuinely believes the experience matters, comes by and refills your water without being asked. He doesn't know who you are. He thinks you're a regional food writer. That's what you told the host. The room is 70% full on a Tuesday. The ticket times are fast. A table of 4 near the window is celebrating something, a birthday maybe, and they're loud in the way people are loud when they're actually having a good time, rather than performing it. You eat the tomato bisque. You think about 340 people and whether you made the right call and whether the math is going to cooperate with your belief that this brand still has a real reason to exist. You think it does. You think Earl is evidence of that. The room is evidence. The bisque is evidence. You finish dinner, you tip 40% and leave before he can figure out who you are. Day 88. You walk into the bank meeting in Nashville with a 12-page operations summary, a unit-by-unit P&L comparison, and a forward projection built on the actual numbers from the last 60 days rather than assumptions. Carla built the deck. You reviewed it 4 times. It is honest about where you are and specific about where the trajectory goes. The loan officer, a careful woman named Patricia who has been doing commercial lending for 19 years and who has seen enough turnaround stories to have a well-calibrated skepticism about all of them, reads through the summary without speaking for 11 minutes. Then she asks 2 questions. Both of them are the right questions, which tells you she's done her own homework. You answer both of them completely. She asks for a 30-day extension on the covenant review to monitor the trend line. You agree. You were prepared for this. You shake hands. You walk out into the Nashville afternoon, and the air is warm and there's a smell of something coming from the barbecue place 2 doors down, and you stand on the sidewalk for a moment and let yourself feel the thing you've been keeping in a sealed compartment for 88 days. Not relief, exactly. Something more like the knowledge that the bet was right. Not proven yet. Not finished. But directionally correct in a way that you felt from the first conversation with the Bowling Green host and the Clarksville tomato bisque and the 14 pages of notes in a corner booth on day 1. 30 days later, Patricia's office approves the covenant waiver. The chain is at 8 locations now, the 2 additional closures handled cleanly in week 10 after the data made the decision obvious. 8 locations, leaner, faster, pointed at something real. The consolidator Gerald mentioned calls your operator in month 5. They're interested in the brand. You take the meeting not because you're ready to sell, but because you want to know what someone with institutional capital thinks this thing is worth after what you've built in 5 months. They give you a number. It's 40% above what you paid. You thank them for their time. You tell them you'll be in touch. You drive back to Nashville with Earl's location on your route home. You pull into the parking lot, full on a Wednesday. You don't go inside. You just sit there for a minute, looking at the lights through the window and the shapes of people having dinner. And you think about a folder on a kitchen table at 11:22 p.m. and a countdown clock and 340 people who don't know your name. 8 locations. Profitable. The tomato bisque is still on the menu. It was always going to stay on the menu. You put the car in drive. There's another folder waiting at home. There's always another folder.